Okay, deep thoughts. Deep thoughts while waking up in the morning, scrolling through news. A note on that: scrolling through news. A lot of people say you shouldn't scroll through news first thing in the morning. It puts you in a bad mood. But dude, that's just what I do. Puts me in a bad mood. So what? At least I know what's going on in the world. So I was thinking this morning, three things actually. First one was with you guys as daughters and my own, for that matter. Um, Someday they're gonna get married, right? So, do you guys have a plan on how you're going to handle that? Are you just going to approach the future in-laws and be like, "Hey, we're going 50-50." Um, I know it's tradition for the bride to pay for it, but I got three daughters or five or how many ever you have, Josh. I got five daughters. I got to marry off. I mean, so do you have a fund for that? Are you saving for it? Or are you just going to tell them, "Hey, do it on the cheap," because you got a wife to deal with too, man. She's not going to want her daughter to have no cheap wedding. You know what I'm saying? Have you thought about that? Has that gone through?
I mean, it's it's one of those. It may have come up in conversation like once. Like we're gonna have to, we're gonna wind up and be paying for three weddings, but it's not something like I'm planning for right now. Like we don't have a sinking fund or a line item fund. It's like weddings. Um, right now, we're trying to get them through high school. We're trying to get them through. We're trying to get them their first vehicles. My oldest daughter, she's got hers. Our youngest just got her driver's permit on this past Friday. She was a first time go, so she's got her permit. So everybody get off the sidewalks, and you know, so now all three of ours are behind the wheel. Two of them supervise, one of them not. But no, it's not something that we think about. It really, it's not. It's one of those like we'll fall off that bridge when we get there, and you know, you're right. Like my wife's absolutely not gonna take my advice because I'm gonna tell them. I'm like, hey, take all the money that you would save and spend on your wedding and have one invest some of it, take the other half, and go have a badass honeymoon somewhere. Take yourself down to the courthouse, spend the $40, get your marriage certificate, do the GOP thing, and then call it a day. Because you're going to spend a whole bunch of money on a wedding that half the people show up, you're not even going to like, and then you're gonna pay a fortune for some half-eaten wedding cake. Don't do it.
Mm.
So I don't know,
No,
but I
that may
but I
work
know
on
that's
two
not
or
gonna
three of them.
fly.
That
Yeah.
yeah, I know, right? That may work on two out of three of them, but one's gonna. So, what about you, Roger?
So two daughters. The oldest one was married previously, and then her husband passed away or whatever. And a couple things on that. So one, I agree with Josh. It's so my wife and I, when we did ours, kind of try to take our model and pass it down to my kids. The first time we got married, we just did the Vegas thing. It was cheap, and we paid like the $450 for the limo ride and whatever. He takes you to the courthouse, and it was the ceremony and the stuff like that was forgettable. I guess the most memorable part, other than my wife, was the fact that we got married at the Little White Chapel, which is the same place that Jordan got married and Joan Rivers got married all 14 of her times there and whatever. So, it's cool because it's a famous place that people know. But first, just like Josh said, it's spot on, man. I would recommend looking back at it. So we did our vow renewal almost 10 years ago now, and we did it in Vegas. And Josh hit it on the head with taking that money and putting it away because here's the deal. When we did our vow renewal back in Vegas, we basically bought a package and you know what? We were financially sound and we could actually afford to have a good wedding and enjoy it, right? Because the other part of that is at that age, at whatever it is, 22, 24, 25, do you really want to blow 10, 15, 20 grand on something like that? There are probably better things, especially now with like housing costs and this and that. There are a whole lot better things to do with that 15, $20,000 or whatever it is that you're going to spend. So, especially at that young age, hopefully you can cut a deal. And I think going back, I would be like, look, let's go. And for us, it works out because we're right here, but like, let's do the Vegas wedding package thing, and my wife's being an event planner. She knocked it out of the park. I mean, she went out and hired a professional photographer that was there. That was like half the price of what you would find, just on, any other professional service. Our pastor was the dude off The Wedding Singer. I think he was in that movie. We hired him for like a couple $100, and she piecemealed everything and it came out fairly affordable, but it was a great experience. We had folks, couple of our listeners actually showed up. We had a great 4 or 5 days out there. We hired a party bus, put a bunch of beer on there, did a tour. So it was a lot more affordable and it was a lot more memorable. And I like the Vegas style because we weren't there to entertain everybody for 4, 5, 6 days, because that's the other challenge, right? Like you get beyond the money. All this family flies in to go see Josh's, 9 daughters get married. It's like, what do you do with them for 10 days, 8 days, 6 days, 4 days, right? So this here, it's like, hey, here are the times. Here's where we got to be. Here's the dress. Don't be light out of uniform, and we'll rock and roll. Whatever you do outside of that is on you. So I think going back to that, like we don't have anything set up for our middle daughter, but I think the ideal would be, hey, let's do something that's $3,000, $4,000. We can do some package deal somewhere, whether you want to do it in San Diego on the beach or whatever, but let's not spend $15,000 on flowers that are going to die, in 3 days that you can't take back with you anyway. Because there's probably a lot better things that you can do with the money. And I guess my question, I'll throw it back to you, Luke. As you deal with your daughter, she's getting older. I don't even know what their expectations are anymore, because there's a big difference. I think when you look 10, 15, 20 years ago, it was, the daughter's family pays for the wedding. It's supposed to be big and da 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 da. Whereas I don't even know if there's that expectation anymore where the kids want anything like that. I mean, do you think they're a little bit more frugal as far as their money and spending, and maybe like, yeah, Dad, I could actually do something better with this $15,000 or whatever the
Yeah,
cost is?
I mean, my daughter's trad as hell, man. She's gonna want some weird like destination wedding, but not like you think. Not like in Mexico. She's gonna want to go up to the mountains or something and do like a small ceremony. Um, but I think other kids, like my stepson and his girlfriend, if they ever got married, I think that they would go uh, the cheapest route, probably. So there's two different ends of the spectrum. I mean, I think a lot of kids aren't going to have a choice uh, but to have a smaller wedding. But I don't know. Could be completely wrong on that. There's still a lot of sorority girls out there whose parents are loaded and want to have the big wedding. I mean, when my wife and I got married, we were both older, so parents paying for it was kind of out of the question, you know. So, but we did it on the cheap. She did all the work. Uh, we reserved a place that provided food, for the reception, and we bought our own booze, rented a couple margarita machines, and she did all the decorating herself with some help of some friends and neighbors. And we had two photographers, and both of them were free. And it was a cool little wedding, man. It really was. Uh, and it was, I'd say, all in probably about $4,000 tops. And it was
Wow,
cool. It was,
that's
yeah,
fantastic.
it was a cool little wedding. My brother-in-law officiated it. It was pretty neat. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like Josh. I haven't set aside any money for it. But when the rubber meets the road, it's going to be like, well, the budget's not unlimited. And
But
my
she's
daughter,
getting older too. So what's
yeah,
that cutoff to where you say, hey, not that you don't chip in, I get that, but like, where's the cutoff where you say, hey, the wedding is kind of your responsibility, and we'll get you some nice stuff or whatever,
30.
right?
I'd say 30.
30.
Well, yeah, and it depends. It's all situational dependent, of course. But I think that she's going to be the type that just like wants to pay for most of it on her own anyway. But she could do what she wants to do. But that destination wedding on the top of Wheeler Peak in New Mexico or something. I mean, my old man's in pretty good shape. He made that hike 7 years ago, but I don't know if he could do that anymore. Definitely not my mom. Definitely not some of the other in-laws. But yeah, yeah, it's an interesting question. Here's the thing, though. Here's the punchline to this whole deal: is I learned recently over the past couple weeks that in the Mexican culture, in particular, it's the groom's responsibility to pay for the wedding. So I think when comes time
Heck
for my
yeah,
daughters to get married, I'm going to identify as Hispanic, and I'm
you
gonna be like,
should.
yeah, you know what? I'm Hispanic, and sorry to say, but bro, you're paying for this wedding, not me.
Hell
And then
yeah.
when it comes time for my stepson, I'm gonna be white again, and I'll be like,
Well, plus you have to be practical too, though, because it's like even my mom. My mom did a lot of stuff during our vow renewal, but at that point, we'd been married 13 years, so it was like, okay, we've got kids. You've been married 13 years. The marriage is probably going to last, and we all want to believe that our kids are going to be married. They're going to find their true love and they're going to be married forever. But statistically, right? If you look at statistics, that's going to be 50-50, somewhere down the middle. So that's the other thing too. It's like, man, you spend all this money on a wedding up front when they're 22, 23, and hopefully they're older when they decide to do that. I think my middle daughter, she'll be a little bit older. She gets her career going and this and that, but you hate to spend all that money. It's like, man, they get divorced like 5, 6, 7 years later. Not that you wish that on anybody, but that's a lot of money down the toilet bowl, man.
so okay. So second morning thought as I'm laying in bed scrolling the news is TikTok, right? So TikTok's got to go. But that's going to be a tough sell for a lot of voters, man. Big voting bloc does not want that. I'm talking about young kids. First of all, any listeners out there, if you have TikTok, just bite the bullet and take it off your stuff. Take it off your stuff. You're going to have to probably re-image or, completely start over, because those terms of service, it remains on your device. Yeah, they're in the background. God knows what it's doing. But so there's a push on both sides of the aisle now to get rid of TikTok, or not get rid of it, but to, ban it in the US, which is going to make a lot of people upset. So I'm going to kick this to Josh first. And I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but let's say, and play the game with me here. Let's say you have a choice. Okay. You can ban TikTok, and Ron DeSantis, whoever your preferred candidate, they got behind the ban TikTok thing. And, if you ban TikTok, Ron DeSantis, whoever your preferred candidate is, will lose the next presidential election. But TikTok is banned. Would you rather have TikTok banned and have a Democrat in the White House again? And don't play the game of, well, no, he shouldn't ban it, and then once he gets in, he will ban it. That's not the point of the game. It's like, would you rather get rid of TikTok now and have another 4 years of a Democrat? Let's just say it's Joe Biden. Or would you rather have Ron DeSantis and TikTok? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So what's your answer on that?
I don't know. It's a good question, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, gun to my head, if I had to pick one, I would rather have DeSantis as president and have TikTok. Because I look at it like this. Yeah, China's collecting, information via TikTok, but at the same time, I would, that's always going to be there. China's always collecting information, right? They're always going to be collecting information. I would rather have the communist, collecting information via social media app than have a communist in the White House at the levers of power, writing executive orders.
Do you think that TikTok is simply a collection platform and not a
No, it's an
psyop?
influence. It's a psyop. Yeah, no, it's 100% psyop platform, and it's a fantastic one. Yeah, no, I don't think it's just a collection platform at all. But yeah, I would rather have DeSantis in the White House and TikTok exist than vice versa, because they'll find another psyop platform. You ban TikTok, something else is going to come along, and we're going to go back through this again, and it'll take years, to work its way through. Because you remember Trump tried to ban TikTok in 2020. He brought it up, or before 2020, he brought it up, and everybody was like, xenophobic, this, that, and the other. And here we are, how many years later, we're talking about banning TikTok. So if it's not TikTok, it's going to be something else. It'll be TokTik. And, so we'll go through this again. I'd rather have DeSantis in the White House.
Roger?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, here's the thing with the TikTok. So personally, and even professionally, I'm like you. Kids, get that crap off your phones, right? I have no issues with the government banning TikTok as I believe they should, and I believe every individual should be like, "Hey, screw this, man! I'm not putting this stuff on my phone." But there's also some free will, right? There's some, you do have capitalism, and I think for the government, you ban it. The job of the government should be to inform folks of the threat, which they've done a very poor job of. And then at that point, hey, if the private citizen wants to put their stuff up there like that, let's do it. Now and I was asked this question last week, and I kind of want to, we've touched on it a little bit, but just to kind of reframe this thing for some of the listeners, that like, why is it such a bad idea? Because in 2017, China passed, or their national intelligence law went into effect. I think it was like July 2017, something like that. I'll read just a snippet of it. There, particular Article 7 states that the obligation of Chinese citizens to support national intelligence work. However, and these are quotes, it does not authorize preemptive spying. National intelligence work must be defensive in nature. So basically what that means, along with the rest of the article, is that the Chinese government can go to any other Chinese company, entity, organization, what have you, and say, okay, you're going to perform these actions or collect this data or do whatever in support of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, the intelligence infrastructure, right? And so with TikTok, it is owned by ByteDance, and ByteDance is based out of China. They're headquartered in China. They do have the TikTok office, I think, is actually in LA, but their parent company is ByteDance, owned by China, or in China. So theoretically, what can happen, and what has happened, if you watch, like I think it was the Forbes reporters where they were pulling surveillance on, um, the Chinese government can say, "Hey, look, we need, like we did with the Forbes reporters. I want to know the IP addresses and location of these reporters that might be close to some of our activities that are going on, and we're going to find out where they're at." And then again, from there, it's a collection piece, or like you mentioned with, a psyops campaign, information operations. Then they can start to craft messages, whether it's through their own bots and their own, content distributors to put out messaging, whether it be through censorship to block other things, like they were talking about Tiananmen Square and some other things. Like, hey, has TikTok blocked any of this? And I don't know if you guys caught too much of the hearing, but the CEO Shao Chu was on there. Here's the number one takeaway: the CEO does not allow his own kids to be on TikTok. Okay, so that's telling in itself, right? Uh, Number two, I think, when you hear his responses, one, you can tell it's very crafted. Do you store data? Or actually, his statement when he came out was like, "We do not store data on U.S. persons." Da 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 da. That's what he kept, and he kept emphasizing store, store, store. Well, store is only one of the three, right? Because you have collect and disseminate as well. And then, fortunately, some of the congressmen were up there and they were asking, "Well, how about the transmitting? How about the sharing?" And then he really couldn't give a defined answer on that. Yeah, what that means is that he's sharing or transmitting data to China, and China can be storing that info. What I didn't like about it, though, I think he took his approach all wrong. He was immediately on the defensive. And if you get a chance to go back to YouTube, take a look at it, because what's interesting to me, and this kind of goes to my whole capitalism thing. I know it's kind of weird. You talk about capitalism and China and TikTok, but he was purely on the defensive mode when he should have come out when they were asking about data collection and this. I should be like, you damn right we collect data. Like, dude, we are a for-profit company. We are a for-profit company that probably half those people up there are invested in. And you know what? We don't charge for the platform. So like Facebook, like Twitter, like LinkedIn, like VK, like Reddit, like all these other places, we absolutely collect data, because you know what? That is a new way of marketing. That is how ads are distributed. That's how that, because he could have tied himself in with the broader big tech social media enterprise, right? Instead, he was on the defensive. And when they started hammering him about, well, will you stop collecting data? But his response should have been, are you going to subsidize this? Where are you going to subsidize my for-profit private company, and the lost revenue because you want me to stop that? And then you go down the slippery slope. Well, now you say TikTok because you don't like it, and I get it; it's a huge democratic platform. But like Josh says, hey, when TokTik comes out, you going to ban them too? So where does it stop? So there is a very fine line, understanding the threat of TikTok and the ties to CCP, but there is a libertarian view to that as well.
Yeah, libertarian can kiss my ass when it comes to companies from China. Legislation needs to be drafted that says this particular type of platform cannot be used in the U.S. And you codify it real clearly, so that there can't be another talk tick. Instead, and this is what blows my mind. It's
So
like,
for individual citizens, you're going to be able to say, or you want to say, hey,
well, they can
comes
get
from
a
China,
beep.
can't use it.
No, I didn't say that. I said a certain type. Well, with the algorithm, everything, what TikTok is cannot be used in the United States. It can't. Well, people will always get away around it. But again, this goes back to the market, right? I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Elon Musk has something ready to go and is lobbying members of Congress, because now both sides are on it. So okay, you know, somebody's talking to somebody. There's some money to be made here. So as soon as TikTok is banned, there will be another type of platform. Like Facebook has Facebook Reels. Instagram could very easily put together
Well, remember
some.
Vine and Periscope,
Yeah,
right? Maybe it was
yeah,
just a marketing thing, because that was years ahead of this.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guarantee you, somebody has got something in the chute ready to fill that gap. And it's like all these people, oh, don't take away TikTok. Don't you realize there will be another platform for you? Don't take away their livelihoods, so on and so forth. Uh, Gulag Gardens. Well, I just don't see how any Chinese companies have rights in the U.S. I just don't. I don't see it. I mean, I understand we live now. Roger's the globalist, but I tend to see TikTok as a near, I wouldn't say existential threat, but it's a huge threat. Um,
Sure.
Now, is that by design, or is it just the algorithm? That somebody created an algorithm? It could have come from France. or Germany or Brazil or something like that. It could be that sort of company. I think it's a combination of the two. I think Ministry of State Security is watching really close on how this is absorbed by the U.S. and Western population, civilization, societies, whatever you want to call it, and they're manipulating it. So I see it as a huge threat. I guess I would rather have. I'm going to go with Josh. My initial feeling is I'd rather have TikTok gone and everything like it gone. Anything from the Chinese Communist Party, anything coming out of China that's going to be any sort of threat is banned in the U.S. I was leaning toward I'd rather have that in the other 4 years of Joe Biden, but yeah, I don't know. Now to sit here and think about it, hear what you guys are saying, I'm like, yeah, I guess I'll take a really good candidate over TikTok remaining in place. But again, I just see I see the market really coming through. If TikTok was just completely banned, I see something else coming out. And hey, remember when we used to use TikTok? Ha ha ha. Like Vine. Remember when we used to use Vine? That was
Remember
the
we all had
gag.
MySpace accounts? Ha ha ha.
Yeah. So okay, another last thing. I was scrolling through the news, and I'll kick it over to you guys for y'all's what y'all want to talk about. But The Hill had an article this morning on these are the most livable U.S. cities in 2023. Study finds, and I'll read the first couple paragraphs. As people continue to shift back to pre-pandemic social recreational activities, even if they are still working remotely, a new study has broken down the best U.S. cities in which to work, learn, hang out, and generally enjoy oneself. Niche, a data analysis company, used census data, surveys, and other info sources to break down the best cities in the U.S., take into account the cost of living. That's an important one, right? The cost of living. Remember that when we go through this list. School quality, nightlife, walkability, and outdoor activities, and more. So I'm going to go down the list, and this is in order. You guys tell me. Now remember what the data points were. Number 1, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Number 2, Arlington, Washington, D.C. I'm just going to go down the ones that I've been to. Columbia, Baltimore area. Berkeley, Irvine in L.A., Bellevue in Seattle, Plano, Dallas-Fort Worth, Richardson, Dallas-Fort Worth, Seattle, Sunnyvale in San Francisco, Santa Clara, and then rounding out at the very bottom is Josh's Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, my thing is this. What is this the best or the most livable cities for the wealthy? Because that's what it is. I've been to all those places and trying to even find a home in the places that I listed there. You're not going to find anything decent for less than $750,000. I mean, and that would be on the low end. So livable cities. I mean, come on, really? I mean, Raleigh, I guess, Josh. I mean, you could probably find something in Raleigh, but I don't know, dude. It just seems like that's the most livable cities for the rich, for the wealthy, or at least 2 GS15s living together. 2 O6s or whatever with one child and 1.5 dogs or something like that. I mean, livable cities, Josh. I'll ask you: do you think that list there is? Could you live in any one of those except Raleigh? Number 1. And number 2, in your opinion, what are some livable cities?
No, you can't live in those cities unless you're, like you said, unless you're super wealthy. The average home price in Raleigh, just pulled it up as you were reading that. The average home price in Raleigh is $420K. That's a single, for a single family home. That's not what I would constitute a livable city. Are there parts of Raleigh on the outskirts, just outside Raleigh that you could live, for relatively cheap? Yeah, but it ain't Wake County. You're not going to live in Wake County. You got a Wake County zip code, you're paying. I would be interested to see that list. I would be interested to see the most dangerous cities in America superimposed over that list as well.
You
When we
did.
start talking about crime, yeah, that's probably the same. When you start talking about crime, because just Sunnyvale in the Bay Area. But are you crazy? I would be curious to know what the average home price is there. Well, it's walkable. Okay, well, you're going to get mugged half a block from your house after you dodge all the piles of poo. Like that's not livable. Livable for who? Heroin addicts? That's crazy. Homeless people? I mean, I guess homeless people, they can live anywhere.
Josh, This is according to Redfin. Sunnyvale housing market is very competitive, scoring 89 out of 100. The average Sunnyvale house price was $1.79 million
Oh
last month.
Jesus. Yeah. That's, that's insane. That list is the Hill is stupid. The Hill should delete their Twitter account for putting that out. That's absolutely asinine.
So what are I know you live in a nice place. You like it. You seem to like it a lot. Would you consider it a livable city, or have you been to other places where it's like, you know what, I could live here. I could live here and be pretty happy. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean the area that we live in, like and you guys, I mean, you guys have spent just as much time here. It's a golf community. It's you know the cost of living is very low. There's not, now walkable. There's small portions of it that are walkable, just in little towns that are around here, just the downtown area. It's walkable. I mean, you're not going to walk from my house to go get something to eat, right? I mean, unless you want to walk on the shoulder of a road, for a mile or two. Some other places that I would say are livable and nice. Beaufort, South Carolina. I think it's a gorgeous place. It's very affordable. It's in between Savannah and Hilton Head, down in the Low Country. If you go out toward the mountains in North Carolina, the Boone, Banner Elk area, nice, livable. Florida. You go down to Tarpon Springs, anywhere on the Gulf Coast, outside of, I'd say north of Tampa on the Gulf Coast, anywhere other than like Panama City. It's just because I hate Panama City with a passion. I spent too much time in Panama City. There's a lot of poor life choices made in that area. But it's just, yeah, man. The Midwest, I'd say, let's see, let's say Midwest, maybe, out in Kansas, even if you go like central Kansas, let's talk about, out in central Kansas, maybe like a place like Hayes, that's livable, nice, decent. Eastern Montana.
Hey man, they still do like government land grants in Kansas where they'll like give you 5 acres if you'll build a house on there in like 6 months or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, they're trying to get people out there, man. I mean, you want to talk about a place where there's nothing out there? There's nothing out there. It's just it literally is, corn, that far in central Kansas and moving west. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the areas that have been, that are nice, that are livable. That I would take. Western Montana is nice, but it's not livable anymore. Bozeman's crazy expensive. Kalispell is through the roof expensive. Trying to think of a couple more places off the top of my head. There's some places in West Virginia that are livable and really nice and very affordable. Wheeling is, I think I saw a thing on Wheeling it's like one of the most affordable places in the United States as far as your dollar goes for housing. So that would be my answer. Roger, what you got on Luke's Barbara Walters question there?
Well, I think the Hill article was more propaganda to keep the people that are there and keep them from leaving, right?
Hey, yeah. Look, and you got to look at it this way, right? When they write an article like that, whoever put this together, they're contacting city councils and saying, "Hey, we're going to put this article together." And if you notice, they're all expensive. They all have money to burn, and that there's some money changed hands or something, where it's like, "Hey, that," because I'm just saying the fix is in on that list.
Yeah, and it also depends on your demographics, right? It depends on what stage you are in life. I mean, when I look at how even half the places you mentioned, I still couldn't afford to live there now, but I have a much better chance of living at some of those places at this stage in my life than I did when I was 22 or 23. So I think some of it's just a demographic and who are they saying this is the best place? Because when I look at out here, we try to get my oldest daughter to live out here with us, early on. But the town that I'm in is very, very mature. It's an older town and what have you. And it's not her age group. I'm not worried about having a walking around downtown district or finding somewhere where I don't have to have a car. Like if you live in DC or Cambridge, right? You don't have to have a vehicle. You've got a train system. You got, public trans. You can get away. So you're saving money on that. They're not buying houses. They're renting places, apartments or condos or townhouses or whatever. So, you're spending more money on the housing market, but you're spending less on vehicles and travel and fuel, maintenance, that type of stuff. But, you know, when you're 22, 23, you need that. You need that nightlife. You want to have your little bar that you go down to and have beers every night. As you get older at our age, man, I ain't looking to do that. I'm actually like, if you would just leave me alone, that would be great. If there's somewhere I want to go get a drink, I'll drive or I'll get an Uber. Right. So, you know, a lot of that stuff's like you said, it's propaganda. It's making those people that paid that $1.7 million feel better about themselves that they spent that $1.7 million. Because I tell you, the best places to live aren't publicizing it. You know, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some towns locally that want to be like, hey, man, we don't want a flux of Californians in here or Massachusetts, you know, people from Massachusetts or Boston, you know, that type of like they're not trying to do that. And the residents there, the local residents, you know, especially if they have the revenue to support their way of life out there in their town, that's kind of how they want to live it. You know, that's the one. I love the town that I'm in, but the problem is when you look at it from when I moved here 7 years ago to now, it's like 3 times the size. Like that quiet little town that we had, the little town center and this and that no longer exists. You know, we're borderline becoming like actually a decent sized city or whatever. So, you know, wanting to go to Montana, of course, that can't happen anymore because of Yellowstone. So I think I'm looking at Wyoming, fellas. I think that's the next stop, right? Wyoming.
Idaho, Wyoming, even Idaho's turning around. I've
Yeah,
heard.
I probably got to do Wyoming and then maybe North Dakota may be too far north for me, but I think Wyoming is going to be the next.
Yeah.
That's the next spot I'm looking at.
But for me, livable cities is not. I just don't have the same outlook on it. I mean, when we lived in outside of San Antonio and Lavernia, um, I loved it. You know, it was a 30, 45-minute drive into work. Lavernia, we were 15 minutes out of Lavernia, but there was no city at all. So it's like the most livable city. I don't know. I mean, it's unaffordable because I would need too much, you know, land and not be able to see my neighbors in the middle of the city. So I'm looking at living outside of a big city. So like way outside, like San Antonio, for instance, Dallas, Houston, and like Roger is saying, man, I mean, where he lives used to be out there, and now it's part of Phoenix, man. And so yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, it's not really even fair to ask me like a livable city. I'm with Josh. I there are some cities I do like.
You know what's
Um,
interesting though? They don't talk about like freedoms, right? Like your freedom of movement. Because when I retired the first time, and my wife and I were like, okay, it's just us. The kids are going to go to college and this and that. We can go anywhere, and we really like Santa Monica, and we're like, hey, let's go out and hang out in Santa Monica for a year. Well, you know, one thing I couldn't afford a place big enough to take my dogs with me. I like to smoke cigars. I like my guns. Guess two things that don't go very well in Santa Monica: my guns and cigars. You can't smoke outdoors. You know, you can smoke crack, okay, and you can shoot the black tar heron, but you can't have a cigar outside. So, you know, those are the type things that you also look at as like, hey, man, I want somewhere where I can conceal carry and it's not a big deal. I want somewhere where I can smoke my cigar outside. You know, they just opened up out here in Tempe at the marketplace, open container. So we've got a walking shopping district. And you're like, hey, for this walking shopping district, open container. You know, that's the type of stuff that I want, and you don't see that mentioned as part of your list as any part of the criteria.
Yeah, Colorado went that way. Colorado has some phenomenal places. It's gorgeous, but when it comes to your freedom, good luck. You know, you know, all the crackheads have more freedoms in Colorado, and we got a couple of listeners out there, and you know, Wes being one of them. You know, it is a it's a tragedy that such a gorgeous state has gone so hard left. You know, good luck carrying a gun in Colorado. You know, good luck having high cap mags in Colorado. It's just not going to happen. But it's a gorgeous place. You know, a lot of people love to live there. It's especially if you're an outdoors person, like like we are.
So speaking of crackheads, did you guys? And this is totally off rail this thing, but did you guys hear about the squatter and the dude who squatted on the squatter's property to get his house back?
No,
So this guy, well, I think his mom owns the house, and I might be butchering some of the story. So his mom owns the house, and they were looking to rent it out, and it was empty for a couple months. And this lady's like, "Oh, I want to rent it out," you know, and they needed like, you know, first last month rent, security deposit. Lady couldn't provide all that, so she's like, "Okay." Well, the next thing you know, her furniture shows up at the house, and she's like, "Oh, my mistake. You know, I thought we were getting ready to move in, and so I'm gonna, you know, have it picked up." Come to find out 2-3 days go by, and Josh, you're probably familiar with a lot of this stuff, but the realtor calls and like, hey, there are people living in your house. Like lights are on, this and that. There's furniture in there. People were living there, right? Come to find out they were squatting. And because of, I think it's California, because of where they were at. I mean, dude, when they called the police, the local police were like, hey, this is a court system matter. Like, we don't do any of this. You got to go to the court. So then, knowing that it was going to take 6 months, a year to do all that, and you still may lose or whatever, he drew up a contract with his mom to like rent the place. So while they were gone to work, he moved all his stuff in and squatted on the squatters so they couldn't kick him out. So for what I could tell, so the squatters come home from work, and one was a Department of Corrections official. Believe that.
Oh,
One comes
Jesus.
home, or they found a uniform. So, I'm making that assumption. So they come home and they were like, oh yeah, man, we're sorry it had to end up that way, and ended up packing up all their stuff and leaving that day. Dude, insane.
That's crazy. That should have, you know what? And that should have been a simple phone call to the sheriff saying, hey, there are people that basically broke into my house and they're in there right now.
Yeah.
Like that,
Yeah.
like that's how long that should have lasted. And the sheriff shows up and arrests him for trespassing and takes him to jail.
Well, that's what I don't get. I don't understand how it's not trespassing. There is a fine line. Now, if we have a rental agreement, okay, I get it, right? But with no rental agreement, it's like, dude, you're literally just trespassing. And if it was Texas, they'd probably shoot you.
Yeah. That's dude, that's absolutely crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Our squatter, we had a rental agreement and they just decided to stop paying rent. And yeah, at that point, it does become a court. At that point, it is a court issue. But you don't have a rental agreement and you just show up and all of a sudden there's just people like, that you didn't invite into your house that you own and they're living in it. And the sheriff's like, oh, well, sorry, man, that's a court issue. That's the wrong answer. That is absolutely the wrong answer. And that makes and it's the stuff like that makes the entire state of California unlivable, not just a specific city in it. That's absurd.
Dude, speaking of squatters and homes and all that stuff, man, God bless and pray for those folks down in the South that got hit so hard with them tornadoes. Good Lord. Apparently in Mississippi, I just got a message from a friend down there. It hit the Delta area, and it's a very poor, very poor flat part of Mississippi. It's real sad. I mean, those people had nothing anyway. And I know it went ripped through Georgia. In fact, in Georgia, man, all the listeners in Georgia, man, be careful. Apparently there's a tiger on the loose in Georgia. Did you guys see that?
No.
Tornado hit a zoo and there's a tiger missing. So it's like, man. But if you're gonna have a tiger missing, I guess Georgia's probably the place. You got Marty, who doesn't listen down there. He'll put a few holes in that tiger. But yeah, that was bad, man. Those tornadoes. It seems like, I don't know. I mean, it seems like when I was growing up, the tornadoes were mainly like bad ones, and of course, the media wasn't what it is now. But it seemed like the tornadoes were kind of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. Classic tornado alley. But recently, I guess I don't know if I'm noticing or it's in news more. They seem that system kind of seems to be moving south, like down into the south, like the deep south, because we've had a few of those. I don't know.
You've been listening to too much Greta.
You think? Well,
Yeah.
Hey, man, everything changes, dude. The climate does change. I mean, up here,
absolutely.
In the Panhandle, there's a bad drought that's been going on for a while, and it's the aquifer needs to be recharged. The water table is dropping. It's just not good, dude. But that's just climate change, man. It's just.
Do you realize that every reservoir we have in Arizona is 95% or above? The Roosevelt Lake is at 101%. The Salt River is actually a river, and it's nuts because we have a lot of tourists out here now looking at all the wildflower. I mean, dude, we've actually got lavender growing up out of the desert. I mean, it's insane, dude. But some of it's kind of disheartening because I watch all the as the Salt River runs. And it, eventually makes its way down through California and Mexico. Well, at least in California, it's all running back to the ocean. So that's good. But I think we're actually there's two different drought statuses. There was short term, right? And then there's long term. And for the short term drought status, I think almost the entire state of Arizona is out of the short term drought status. So it's pretty neat. Take a look at like Bartlett Lake and Roosevelt Lake and stuff like that. It's, zero impact to Lake Mead. But I think when you look at the snowpack that we still have left, And just the fact that our aquifers are filling up, ground is becoming hydrated, you'll see less water come out of Lake Mead. But I want to touch real quick on another topic here. So for those that don't follow us on Facebook or whatever, we have a Slack channel now, and it's pretty cool. It's a good way for us to kind of interact on a daily basis with some of our listeners. We're able to throw some ideas out there, and the fact is, like what we talk about here on the podcast YouTube channel is probably what 10% of the conversations that we have throughout the week. Just articles that we read, things that we see, things that we want to get thoughts on or get their thoughts on. So the Slack channel, if you need it, hit us up. Look on our Facebook page. We'll have it listed there. We'll try to put a link up on this thing. But it's a good way to real time engage our listeners on some topics. But one of our listeners, he posted this: we need to talk businesses, and I'll throw this at you first, Josh. Specifically, small businesses lean right, big businesses lean left. At what point during a company's growth does that shift occur, and why? Can't say it's money, because why would a company concerned about profit support policy and policymakers who want to destroy free market and redistribute wealth?
Well, I have to go off the top of my head since we didn't lay out what we were going to talk about before we started recording. And this is something that is going to be a little bit deeper than, just let's hit the wave tops and initial thoughts on it. So go ahead and ping Luke on that, man. I'm going to have to think about that for a minute.
Oh, did you like that little dig Josh gave us? Guys did prepare anything.
Yeah.
This is
We're back to the outline.
We're
back to the outline, folks.
Okay, look. Are there more conservative voters or liberal voters?
Liberal.
Yeah. But I don't think it's that simple, because I would think you go to the Michael Jordan, Republicans buy Nikes too. So, hey, the smart thing would be stay middle of the road. Now, some of these huge companies you never hear about them. And that's like Schlumberger. Who knows what Schlumberger is? That's a huge, powerful corporation. But you never heard of them. They stay out. I guess you're maybe talking about like the big banks and stuff like that, going all woke, I'm sure.
That Disney,
Disney.
Because at smaller companies, they tend to be based, on some type of principles, morals, whatever. And somewhere that shifts.
How long do you think this has been going on, though? That's the thing. I think this is a relatively new phenomenon. And I'm with Ben Shapiro. I'm with some of these people when it's like, well, we are now, with all these companies going woke, we are, reaping what the universities have created. Ultra left, factories that just brainwash the kids. And now these kids are getting jobs, advisory positions, maybe some lower corporate board positions on these companies, and saying, hey, this is the way to go. Because, and I'm telling you, it's not because it's the right thing to do. They have a twisted mindset, completely 180 of Michael Jordan. It's like, no, this side's going to win. This is not only the right thing to do, but this is how we remain profitable, because their view of the world is so skewed. Like Disney, they think that that's what the people want. It's not what the people want at all. It's what, maybe 2% of the audience wants. The rest are just like being held at gunpoint to go see it and say they liked it, if they vote Democrat. But people want the old school formula. And I'm just talking about Disney. The other wokeness and all that stuff, like I don't know, with JP Morgan and companies like that, why.
Well, look at Mercedes.
But there is ESG. We can't forget that. ESG is a thing. ESG, DEI, they've been, that program incentivizes, supposedly monetarily, everyone going woke. And yeah, that's probably part of it. But again, so I'll kick it back to Josh. This is just me thinking off the top of my head. Hopefully he's had enough time to think about it. I'd have to look at it, but I think that this is a relatively new phenomenon. Like within the last decade or so, maybe a little bit longer. But, it used to be the other way around. Companies are going to go all capitalist on you and crush everyone, be a monopoly, so we can make money for our investors. I don't know if anyone thinks that's still not the case. I got a train to sell you, and maybe it's just a maybe all of it's a smokescreen, right, Josh? Maybe it's all, hey, we're going woke because we really care about all these things, but that's just a smokescreen for us just throttling down on, the consumer and, really screwing over, the average consumer in the name of corporate profits. I don't know. It's a good question. Who was it that posted that?
Wilkie.
Okay. Josh, what do you think?
So I think you're onto something with with the customer base. So I think a lot of companies are looking to expand their customer base, and bringing in, especially going ahead and getting those hooks in the younger consumers. That way they have a repeat customer throughout the course of their life. And those younger consumers, whether we like it or not, are more socially skewed to the left by and large. At least the loudest ones are. And so I think they're playing to that base with a lot of these companies. They're jumping on the social bandwagon, as you see a lot more younger folks, younger adults, kind of skewed to the left. But you're right. When did it begin? I mean, you could go all the way back to the New Deal during the 1930s, right? I mean, a lot of the regulations that the New Deal came in with, kind of, it squeezed out a lot of the small businesses and stuff, and it laid open, for the big businesses and lobbyists. And this is the other, thing where we have these companies that, we talk about, the Disneys, the Nikes, and then, insert your other, woke leftist company, Apple, and the others. They have the lobbyists. They can afford to get in there with big government and go hand in hand with them, because they have the lobbyists to push government that way. Your mom and pop company, your small companies, they don't have that. They can't afford a lobbyist. They're worried about making payroll. Apple's not worried about making payroll. You know, so and then for the small business, that free market conservatism, it really does it really does point to the fact that a lot of them, the government doesn't pick, well, unless they tell them to shut down for a virus that 99.9% of the people are going to survive. They're not going to. The government doesn't really pick the winners and losers by means of tax breaks and regulations and stuff like that. By and large, some of them, yeah, depending upon what market they're in or what part of the industry they're in, yeah. But I don't I don't see that. I would say you don't see that as like you do the larger companies. They have a lot more to lose. Um, so pulled up a quick report, Gallup, and it shows here that red states far outscore blue states in small business friendliness. And they opine that this may be why less affluent Americans are fleeing states that it score, like California, Illinois, New York, Hawaii, um, and moving to red states. And so that may also be why a lot of your small businesses tend to be conservative, vote Republican. Um, and so, but that's kind of, that would be my initial thoughts on, kind of why those big corporations skew left, and versus why small companies tend to, to skew right in their ideology.
Well, look at like Mercedes. Mercedes is vowing to go all electric by 2030. So now we're talking like I don't even know, and we're not even talking about, hey man, big gas, fossil fuel, left, right, whatever. I don't know that an auto industry. I mean, because look at Tesla. Okay, Tesla obviously started out as all electric, and that's how they were built. I don't know that you can take a traditional car company like Mercedes, and 2030 is in 7 years. That's in 6.5 years, and say that we are only going to sell all electric. There's no way they survive. And I think that's part of the question on here. And I got a couple different takes on this thing. First, as a small company, you're squeezing every single penny that you can. I mean, you're trying to keep employees paid, week to week, paycheck to paycheck. You're trying to keep the overhead paid, paycheck to paycheck. You're trying to keep the lights on. You're trying to keep the doors open. So you're going with what works. The market is truly driving your business. You're going with what sells because you have very, very little disposable income to be able to throw around or waste. As you obviously become a larger company, there's a lot more money that you can throw around. And again, it's perspective, right? Because if you make, $500 million a year, you can probably spend $5 million on woke ideology and other things and throw out some ads or whatever. The other thing that you got to look at is vested interest. You know how long the average CEO sticks around in a large business? Less than 5 years. Okay. The CEO of a small business is also the owner and will be there, was there from the day of creation and will be there to the day they close their doors or sell to somebody larger. And so when you look at a small business, there is a lot more vested interest on the owners, the partners, the employees to keep that thing going because it's like us, we all need paychecks, man. We got to work. I got to make money. And so we're looking for not just today, tomorrow. You're looking at the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan. Retirements are tied up in all this stuff. So, especially the age we're getting now, you're starting to get to that point where, hey, man, 5, 6, 7 more years, we got to start changing our investment portfolios, right? Because we need to be a little bit more secure. That's the point that we're at. When you're looking at the CEOs, COOs, and then top level executives of those large companies, dude, they're there for less than 5 years. All they're trying to do is capitalize while they're there, and they're going to move on. And a lot of this stuff, what they're finding, and you see it all the time, what they do is they cater to the desires of the government because half these people are going to get kickbacks and go on that payroll. I mean, because that's what happens. I mean, you look like the Federal Reserve out in San Francisco and SVB, right? The bank that went under. The CEO of that bank actually sits on that board to determine risk. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's not just hey, you live, breathe, and bleed that one small business. They got aspirations that are beyond the business they are running. The other side to it, and Luke, I never really thought about it, but you bring up a very good point. You only hear the large businesses that go woke because they're the ones that are trying to increase their market share or whatever. Maybe they think there are enough, trans kids or whatever that market share is large enough that they need to go public with this stuff and they can draw more trans kids to come into Disneyland or Disney World, which they're already doing anyway. I mean, so I don't know that you gain anything, but I think you're spot on too. There are probably, we know there are a lot of large corporations that they don't say anything, man. They just stay out of it. They do what they do. And my guess is, even though the Disney's, ESPN owned by Disney, ABC, the Mercedes, those companies make the news, Gatorade. I have to believe it's a smaller percentage than what we think. They're just the ones that we're seeing every day because of the ads and the commercials, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like I said, I think the huge ones stay silent and maybe speak out when it could, when there's some pending legislation, whoever's in charge, they lean a little left. Yeah, that's a really good question by Wilkie there. So Chris just threw something in the Slack channel. I just asked any topics, and I don't know if this kind of I didn't really dovetail into Wilkie's point, but it kind of dovetails into the from the TikTok conversation. Chris, the manipulation of Chat GPT by biased moderators to indoctrinate the next generation of voters. First of all, just while I give Josh some time to think about that. First of all, I don't think it's AI. It's not AI. AI, artificial intelligence. The bar on what it is constantly moving. But at the end of the day, if it can pass a Turing test, and I'm not going to get into what a Turing test is, basically to fool a human being into thinking they're talking to a human, it doesn't necessarily pass the Turing test. Nothing has yet that we know of. It is an advanced algorithm with supercharged computing power. And if you look at Boyle's law, I think it's Boyle's law of computing power doubles every 2 years exponentially. So yeah, EVs. Yeah, absolutely right. Josh said that, going back to the other point, the infrastructure will not be in place in the U.S. for EVs in 7 years. That's 100% right. I mean, it would be more, to go back to the Mercedes thing, it would be more believable if they said we're going to go 100% hybrid. We're going to have 70% hybrid, 30% EV, straight EV by 2030. That would be more realistic. But Even Joe
And wouldn't
Biden
that
said
make
it.
sense from a marketing point? Because you might actually get people, right, that are like, hey, man, I kind of like this electric thing because I
Yep.
live in town where I only drive 4 or 5 miles a day. And you know what? I can get away with electric.
Hey, Tesla got me, man. Tesla completely got me. It's like if like I said in the last podcast, the one before, if it was reasonable and practical, I'd get a Tesla because I thought it was awesome. I really
So you
liked it.
now, so you support Russia. Okay, good.
Wait,
It's good to know.
how does that work? Wait a minute. If
Because that's
anything,
what
I
it is now
support
on Twitter.
China. If
Or
anything,
China. Yeah, them too.
I support China because May Musk right now is in China touring a Tesla facility, and she's just saying great things about China. It's like
There you go.
whatever. So back to the
Chinese
Chat
supporter.
GPT thing. What Chris said. It's Chris didn't say anything about AI, but and Roger probably knows more about Chat GPT because I think you've played with it a little bit, and our listener Scott has played with it quite a bit. He put out that little that clip of Josh doing his anti 2A. And it's a he I think Scott entered a few parameters, anti Second Amendment, so on and so forth, sampled Josh's voice, and I mean, you could tell it wasn't Josh. I mean, it would it sounded like Josh. It was like 75% there, but you're listening real close, and you're like, well, the gravelly is not quite there. He's definitely reading off of a script if it is Josh and whatever, but it's close. Chat GPT is on version 4. It's going to move to 5. But back to the algorithm thing, these things are only as good as the programmers, the person writing the algorithm. And you talk about some woke stuff, man. Chat GPT is all woke. They won't say certain things. I think somebody did an experiment, write a poem praising Donald Trump, and Chat GPT basically said I can't do that. They just said we can't do that. Okay, write a poem praising Joe Biden. It spit out a poem within 2 or 3 seconds, praising Joe Biden to the rafters. So that's woke. So Josh, what do you think of Chat GPT? I mean, I should probably just jump on it and get way more familiar with it because this is, in my opinion, the next thing. This is the next thing.
It's absolutely the next thing. So I think it's fascinating and terrifying all at the same time. I mean, so who was it that used Chat GPT to, was like, tell me about Culper's Canteen Cup podcast, and Chat GPT spit out, and we
That was
posted it.
Scott.
Okay, yeah. And so, it was, oh yeah, man, this is great. Give it a listen, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, okay. But, Chat GP is also dangerous on a number of levels. One, especially for businesses. So there's some companies out there that are playing around with using Chat GPT, to enhance their workflows and workforce stuff like that. Well, once you put your intellectual property and your trade secret information into Chat GPT to get it to churn out something for you, well, now you've just given up. Where does that go? Who gets access to your IP? But the larger use of it, though, it can't detect sarcasm. It can't detect nuance. And it's made some comments like, quote, selfish humans deserve to be wiped out. This is coming from ChatGPT, and you're like, okay, it, it's woke, but it doesn't have a moral compass. It doesn't have a moral compass like a human being does. And so, what's to say that ChatGPT doesn't, become the David Koresh, style figure, the Jim Jones, and start leading people down the primrose path. I mean, but could it be used to, absolutely as a psyop, as an influence campaign? Absolutely. I think it already is in some cases. People are already using it to, for forces of not good. So, but like you said, it's only as good as the people programming it. And right now, it's not AI, but it's going to get there. It's going to get there very quickly, and it's going to supplant it. And people need to know the dangers of this stuff for sure. So those are my thoughts on it.
So when it comes, and I've done quite a bit of playing around with a lot of this stuff, it all comes down to what Luke mentioned, the algorithm, but more importantly, the data points. Where is it pulling from? And when you look at Chat GPT, I mean, I think one of the largest resources that it pulls from is Wikipedia. So as you have a left-leaning media out there that throws out, bottom line is if 75 of the 100 articles that it pulls from are from progressive journalists, progressive media, progressive writings, progressive scholarly articles that we've talked about with universities and this and that, well, guess what kind of results you're going to get? And so one, it's about the data out there. And it's kind of crazy because now, you're starting to hear more and more stories where people are using it for resume building, and college kids are actually using GPT uh, for their essays, right? And there is you don't know the impact of it yet. What's scary is because it is a self-looking ice cream cone. It's going to pull from those liberal articles. It'll spit out a liberal essay, and it just keeps going on, and that essay feeds itself back into the system, and so there's more, right? Um, the problem is you're going to inundate not just society, but especially college level kids that are using this or whatever. You end up putting out more and more progressive articles, and that's what they see. That's what they're going to read. That's what the teachers are going to read. And so it's just that self-looking ice cream cone where it just continues to feed itself in the system. Now, I'm not saying that there's this big, liberal push for it or that they're creating and there's this grand plan, but don't fool yourselves that they won't take advantage of it. Okay. It's just like TikTok. TikTok, I don't believe was like some democratic thing, but hey, they know how to take advantage of it. And one of the things that's very important, especially going back to the TikTok thing, when you look at who's defending it, most of it's Democratic progressive senators or congresspersons, right? Because they know that's how they reach their base. And so when you look at Chat GTP, it's like Josh said, it's scary on one hand, and it's mind blowing on the other hand. The things that's out there. But it'll be interesting to see where it goes from here. And I'm kind of curious to see how colleges start to tackle this stuff. Because I don't know. I forget that there's some programs on top of my head where you used to have to submit stuff for plagiarism and this and that. I don't know. Well, one, you get to a point, and actually, what? I went through this once a couple of years ago. I had to write a paper for Army school I was in, and we had to submit to one of those things. It was like turnitin.com or whatever. No, I wrote this essay like out of my head. I sat down, wrote 4 or 5 pages or whatever. Dude, I got busted like 75% plagiarism because, hey, when it comes down to like Army insider threat, there's only so many new ideas that you're going to throw out there that have not already been written or already in regulations, publications. That's where we get our knowledge from, right? But it misses that assessment piece, some of the sarcasm, some of the nuances that you put in there. These automated programs like this, the algorithms can't pick up on that stuff. I know Luke had a follow up real quick.
Yeah, it's kind of a follow up. It's onto not a new topic, but again, I'm going to use the word dovetails again. I sound like Jen Psaki or something. Instead of circle back, it's dovetail today. Yeah, the Chat GPT, that is interesting how the universities will tackle that and everything. But I just had a quick thought. I was in Austin this past week, as you guys know, and talking to folks and interesting conversations, and I can't remember how the topic of your analysis came up, but it came up, and I was asking the guys. One guy who used to be in the Air Force, the other guy's in the Army. It was actually Jesse, and we all run your analysis. We've all been assigned to be the gazer at some point, and I was just like, I will say this: I was never the by the book gazer. I just didn't do that. And there's a number of reasons. Number one, I just don't want to see another guy's junk. Okay, I just don't. I don't. I'm gonna get back there, to make sure there's no monkey business. But I'm not gonna look over the stall like that one guy did to Greg Spaghetti and just like watch the stream, leave, and enter the cup. The cup. That's funny. And I was just like, well, Luke, you're going against regs when you do that. It's like, hey, man, if a soldier, especially female, is industrious enough to get a fake Johnson or run a little tube or whatever underneath to beat the test, hey man, maybe that's the kind of soldier I want in MI. You know what I'm saying? So I think the same thing. Not this. Okay, this is along the lines of the next topic. I kind of think the same thing about someone using a tool uh, to, I guess you call it, cheat. It's like if someone's able to use a tool to get by in college and turn in the best possible essay, of course the learning points for that particular English class or whatever class it is, the terminal learning objective is not met because they plagiarized an essay. They used a tool to create a well written essay. But on the other hand, yeah, it was Paul. See the flow. Back to the gazer. Uh, the terminal learning objective for an English class is not met, but by another way of looking at it is, well, the student is smart enough to use something to use a tool, uh, modern technology to craft an essay, because it's not just, hey, write an English paper on this. You have to enter certain parameters. You have to fill all that in. It's like Cliff Notes almost, so we get real hung up on plagiarism, all that stuff. But I'm just saying it's a different way of looking at it. But IFL Science came out this past week. Ben Shapiro talked about it. I think it was on Fox News and maybe a couple others. Of IQ scores in the U.S. have recently dropped for the first time in this century. The biggest drop was found among younger people aged 18 to 22. So, with respect to Chat GPT and using it to write an English essay, that's not necessarily by current IQ measurements, IQ test. That's not making you any smarter. It's making you dumber. And case in point is Google Maps. Think about Google Maps, guys. The three of us used to, do certain operations in the military where we relied solely on a paper map. We all had to have the same paper map, so they were all the same. And I would say back then, and this is just recently, this is within the last 10 years, our navigation skills, our natural navigation skills, our true north was better than it is now. Because the three of us, everyone relies on Google Earth, Google Maps, while you're driving, whatever. You're not, you maybe you're freeing up your mind to concentrate on other things. That's true, but your navigation has gone to crap. All three of ours compared to what it used to be. Now take it further back than that. When we were kids in the 80s, hey, your parents are going over to have dinner with another set of parents. Hey, how do I get to your house? Well, it's on Smith Lane over here. You go down Camelback Road. 5 lights on the fourth. On the sixth light. Turn left. Turn left at the big gray house with the Santa Claus out front, and go down 4 more blocks. It was and you were able to make it there without even a paper map. It was before the days of MapQuest. So with the IQ scores dropping, maybe are people getting stupider, or are they using more crutches? Like you guys were saying with Chat GPT, is it going to become a useful crutch, just like Google Maps? So do we need to change the IQ test, to reflect, other skills, or are people truly getting dumber? I mean, what do you think, Josh? I mean,
I I think it's both. So I think some people are getting dumber, but at the same time, I mean, there's it takes a level of I mean, it does take a level of intellect to use the technology that we have that exists, right? And I mean, the people who are able to use it, and I'm talking about like use it, not just punch in your address and hit start on Google Maps, and you just follow the blue line and do what the voice tells you to do. But people who are able to commercialize that, people who are able to, I hate to say weaponize, but people who are able to leverage that for a lot of things, they're not dumb. I mean, they're smart. I mean, maybe that and I haven't seen the IFL Science thing or what Ben Shapiro was talking about. I think a lot of those, it's like we used to call these street smarts. Right, there's a lot of book smart people and there's a lot of street smart people, and generally you may find some that are both, but generally it's kind of a binary thing. It was one or the other. And so I think a lot of people, we've lost the street smart, on a lot of things in the situational awareness, because people have relied on technology way too much to do everything for us. And if anybody's seen the movie Wall-E, years and years ago, basically, Earth wasn't livable anymore, not sustainable, and it was a bunch of people on a spaceship floating around in chairs that basically carried them from the buffet line to the movie theater. And yeah, idiocracy, absolutely. So I think it's probably a little bit of both. I do think that by and large, Americans I'll speak for Americans, have become lazy and relied on technology in a lot of places where they shouldn't have. We've all encountered people whose their natural compass is non-existent, and they couldn't, God bless them, like, and they even have a hard time navigating with Google Maps. Let alone, like, you hand them a paper map, it's like handing Superman kryptonite. You know, they're done. They're going to be purple 3-6 for forever. Um, so I think we get back to it, and I think people need to really dig back into that. And it kind of goes back into, I forget whatever episode it was when we started talking about prepping, and stuff. But how are you going to communicate? What's your pace plan for when that those 50 Chinese weather balloons float across the United States and basically EMP your city, EMP your area that you live in? How are you going to communicate? You got your Buffon radio, like Roger's got. Do you know how to use it? Do the people you need to communicate with, do they have it? How are you going to do it? So
Do you have your generator that Josh's dad told him to buy like 4 years ago?
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's funny he still brings that up. Um, so it was funny. Completely off topic, but about my dad, 'cause he's gonna see this. He had a pretty good time. I sent you guys that picture. He got some 10-year old Rip Van Winkle, some tastings, and he enjoyed it. He really did. I wish I could find a bottle that didn't cost $1,000. I'd get it for him. But yeah, no, I think it's a little bit of both, man. To answer your question.
Yeah, and I think it's not even a crutch. Like I hope it was a crutch because one of the things I try to teach my kids, and this is the thing with Chat GPT, Wikipedia, any of that stuff. Because it's funny how Wikipedia you used to not be able to use as a reference, and now colleges are starting to use that as references. But you want that to be the starting point. Like I have no issue with a kid using Chat GPT, types in a question, why is communism bad? Well, communism is bad because of A, B, C, D, and E. And then that kid further researches A, B, C, and D and comes to that conclusion or comes to their own conclusion or whatever. So I have no problem with you know, Chat GPT, Wikipedia, or anything starting to be threads or providing threads. That's why you have hyperlinks. Like when you look at Wikipedia, it's meant that way. That way, when you start reading and you're like, oh, well, I don't know about this, it's already hyperlinked. So you click the button and the next article comes up. And that's best case scenario. That's what I wanted for my kids. So a crutch is fine. The problem is for the majority of Americans out there, I believe it's become a wheelchair, to where, hey, they're not getting on their feet. They're just going to be stuck in that wheelchair. And that's what they do. It's funny you guys talk about the maps because even now, I don't do it so much now because I've been here long enough, but even now, I set my map so it orients north. So I can see like, my spatial, my mind, how I see this. Like I need to know the layout of the city because like Luke said, you can't find paper maps anymore. It's not the days where we could look at a big paper map and be like, okay, let me get my bearing. Here are the major roads, north, south, east, west, whatever. So now, especially if I go to a new city, I set it to my maps north. So I know what direction I'm traveling and I can kind of lay this out in my mind. And my kids, when they all turned 16, it's funny because I would let them drive because you know how it is before, back in the day, and you're absolutely right, Luke, back in the day, especially when you were riding your bicycle everywhere, you kind of had some layout. I mean, now granted, it wasn't a huge layout of the city, but you kind of knew your neighborhood. Go down to this house, take a left. There's a creek over here, 4 stoplights, stop sign, whatever. With the kids nowadays, it doesn't happen. And so when my kids were 16, I would let them drive for about a month or two, kind of get their bearings around the city. And especially my middle daughter, I remember taking her out to an industrial parking lot that was like 2 miles away from home. I was like, give me your phone, get us home, and it's like, because what if the battery dies? I mean, I think eventually when we put this book out, Harder to Kill, I just actually typed that in there, surviving without technology. It's like, hey, can you find your way home without your phone? Your phone's dead, which happens a lot. You have no Google Maps. You're in bad coverage. What are you going to do? Just drive around for like, I bet, with a lot of these kids nowadays, I don't know what they would do. If they get in an area where there's no cell service, especially get out here in the desert, like what would they do? Just drive around in circles till I guess they got a cell signal or something like that. But that's, I do think that goes back to some individual responsibility. And for those listeners out there that have younger kids, it's like, hey, you have to put your kids through that stuff. It is no different than teaching your kid how to change a tire. Everybody says, everybody knows, well, hey, you got to get out there. And one of the reasons that, I talked about a couple episodes ago when I went boondocking my camper with the generators, Josh's dad, just, I've got two of them. But one of the reasons that we did that was I need to test the left and right limits. Can I survive out here with X amount of gas, with the generators, the Starlink, yada, yada, yada? How long is water truly going to last? Because that's tough, man. You sit there and you think about it. It's like, hey, we've got two of us grown adults. How long will 50 gallons of fresh water last you? Right. So those are the type of limits that you got to push. Now, granted, that's not necessarily in preparation for the apocalypse, but in general, I just kind of like to know what those boundaries are. So hopefully the folks out there, especially younger kids, I get my kids iPads when they were very young because I wanted them to start to go down that rabbit hole, because then they're learning on their own. It's not being force fed to them. Obviously the topic may be force fed to them. You have to write this essay or whatever, but hopefully they find some things that are going on, or find some things that they're reading about that's like, hey, I'm kind of interested in this. I mean, I was sitting here watching the WWE biography, which, dude, I think, Luke, we talked about it before. I think we were like, the Ultimate Warrior one was bad, and the Macho Man was bad. The Jake the Snake Roberts one, good Lord. Yeah, dude, that thing here, it's incredible. But anyway, I'm on the episode now with China, and they're talking about China. And anyway, they have Synthol guy who used to be her personal trainer. But point being is, as you start reading this, you're like, I know this guy. So you click on him, and then you start reading about him, and then they call him Synthol guy. Why do they call him Synthol guy? Because people are injecting oil into their muscles or whatever. So you go down that rabbit hole. And that's something that, one of the reasons we bought our kids iPads was I wanted them to be able to do that. And in that sense, I like it. I mean, granted, I don't know that you can ever replace hard copy book paper, right, to read. It's kind of nice to have, but I like reading on the internet. I like reading on my iPad because of the hyperlinks and because of the fact that, I'll chase those threads, chase those rabbit holes, and hopefully take me into where you're learning, man. You got to learn something every day. So you want it to be a crutch that's going to make them healthier eventually to walk on their own, as opposed to a wheelchair that they're just going to be stuck in for the rest of their life.
So Josh bailed on us. I was going to get into a topic that I know he wanted to talk about.
Oh, I've got a good one for him.
Well, let's do. We're on only an hour 20. So Rodney was asking for some clarification or whatever about what's going on in Syria. Was it Darzor and Hasaka, maybe, where the Iranian proxy groups supposedly. Mm-hmm. Oh no, Josh didn't even listen. Ugh. So the Iranian proxy groups sent some rockets. Thanks for joining us, Josh. Iranian proxy groups sent rockets into Syria. We're retaliating. I think that personally, I'm trying not to get all tinfoil hat and black helicopters on this one, but with the recent broker deal, the Chinese broker deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and now Syria is being pulled into this. China is playing Mr. Peace across the Middle East, supplanting the U.S., all this stuff. I again, tinfoil hat, all that stuff. But Rodney was asking about, like, what's an Iranian proxy group? What does that mean? So on and so forth. I figured you'd probably be the best of the three of us to answer that one. You probably tracked that pretty close in the past few years. In a former life, and kind of give us an explanation of that situation. And I'm gonna kick it to Roger because Josh is having technical difficulties. You still having technical difficulties, Josh? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
No, I don't think.
Good to go.
I don't think so. Okay. Hopefully you can't hear that.
No.
So
but yeah, explain to us the situation and like your take on it, and where it's going to go from here. We sure are aching for another war, it seems.
Yeah, man. All right. So where do we start? So, an Iranian proxy group, Hamas. All right, Hamas is an Iranian proxy group. They do Iran's bidding. They're supplied, they're funded by Iran, and they do their bidding. Although they are not, an official part of the Iranian government, right? So they'd be a proxy group as an example. Now, for what happened in the last 72 hours in eastern Syria, I mean, you could go. I mean, it goes a long ways back. You remember during the Trump administration when we killed Soleimani. Soleimani was basically, he was 2IC, you know, heavily influential throughout the country, throughout the Middle East. We killed him, and you know, he was responsible for the deaths of probably around, you know, it's give or take 600ish, you know, service members, especially, you know, mainly through the explosively formed projectiles in Iraq, especially during the, you know, during the heyday. So Iran attacked for, you know, for some reasons that currently unknown, or haven't, you know, haven't read them, haven't seen them yet. Iran attacked a U.S. base in eastern Syria with a drone. Now, I think what happened was they didn't realize it was U.S. base. They didn't realize U.S. service members and, you know, U.S. people were there. Much like in 2017 when the Syrian Defense Force and the Wagner Group folks attacked an outpost in Syria. They I think they thought it was just, you know, the Kurdish SDF that was present. What they didn't know was, you know, we were prepared for that. We knew it was coming, and we had a number of Americans there. And when they did attack, it did not go well for them. It was glorious to see, you know, to see Russians dying.
Dude,
In a
that
sense.
was an ass whooping of the first order.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty bad. So they attacked this base. They killed a contractor, and they wounded some U.S. service members. So, given that, we attacked, you know, some of the Iranian proxy groups, mostly in the form of Shia militias, in you know, in eastern Syria, where they have some outposts. And then Iran retaliated with some rockets into, you know, some of those areas. So it's still fairly tense. You know, there's an open channel right now, you know, between the United States government and the Iranian government to try and cool some tensions, because that can get out of hand very, very quickly. You know, when we killed Soleimani and they, you know, they launched some, you know, some fairly sizable rockets at Al Assad. I mean, they told us they were, hey, we have to retaliate. We have to do something. They told us about it. You know, we moved a bunch of people out and was like, okay, do your thing. You know, they came in, they wounded a couple people, you know, just, you know, they were concussed and, you know, got their nugget rattled a little bit. They destroyed some of our stuff and we were like, okay. And then everything was, for the most part, everything was kosher, right? At least on the global stage, they got to retaliate and say that, you know, they retaliated against the great Satan and blah, 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 blah. And so, but these things can get out of control very quickly. And it goes back to what, you know, Lucas said a couple times, just a simple mistake, especially with Ukraine and Russia, like a simple mistake can lead us down a road that we can't get off of. And next thing you know, we're at war. Now, with what's going on in Israel, and it's just popped off in the last, like, dude, probably like 30, 45 minutes that I was aware of. There's protesters outside Benjamin Netanyahu's house. The Israeli defense minister has been fired. He was actually here in the States. He just announced that he's going back to Israel right now. Israel's in chaos. They are on the verge of storming Benjamin Netanyahu's house right now, and this is as of a couple of minutes ago, reading on the Twitter machine. Like they're using fire hoses against protesters right now outside Netanyahu's house. I don't know what sparked all this, but if there is a seam that Iran can exploit right now, a moment of weakness, Iran's going to exploit it. So if Iran was going to act to do something, now would probably be a decent time because Israel right now is in complete disarray. There's been Netanyahu hadn't made a statement. The Israeli defense minister is no longer, you know, employed. It's chaos right now, and you know, the chaos is a ladder. Littlefinger said it best. So with us and with us and Iran and that whole, you know, with the deal that China brokered between between Saudi and Iran, that is huge because Saudi and Iran hate each other. They have forever. Right. And for those who may not be familiar, you know, Iran is, both countries are Islamic. Iran is is Shia Islam, and Saudi Arabia is Sunni Islam, and they haven't gotten along for decades. and then you throw in the war in Yemen, between the Saudis and the Houthis, all the Houthi rebels and stuff that Iran has been supporting with lethal aid. And they're definitely not besties. They don't exchange Christmas cards for sure. The fact that China was able to step in and broker a deal between those two, and the US was not involved with it, and now you have Saudi and Iran talking about joining BRICS, is massive. Is absolutely massive. We the United States lost massively on that, in both, just on the world stage and as far as our power. The unipolar world is gone. It's gone. We are no longer the lone superpower. You layer on Honduras, and Honduras isn't exactly a power of any sort, unless you want to talk about murder rates. But Honduras came out today. They severed all diplomatic ties with Taiwan, and they opened up diplomatic ties with China today. And even Mexico talked about potentially joining BRICS. So, as far as our foreign policy goes, how's Anthony Blinken doing? Anybody heard from him lately? What's that guy up to? He doing any foreign policy on behalf of the United States? Because right now, the foreign policy in the world, man, holy moly, it is dog shit. But we did open up our first U.S. military base in Poland officially. Did you guys see that? Remember, yeah. So it happened end of last week. We opened up our first official U.S. military base after Trump said that he wanted to, start up a base there, put a base in Poland. And was like, oh my God, he's destroying our relationships with Germany and everything like that. Yeah, now we have a permanent U.S. military base in Poland. Because it was such a terrible idea. So, anyway, hopefully that answered. Hopefully that answers some people's questions on Iran and the situation right now. Very wave top.
And I think for probably most of us, or at least me, this is where I splinter with libertarians. Because it's all about isolationism and just the U.S. and forget everybody. Like, did you have what people don't understand what China's doing right now? These are the same people that during the Abraham Accords, which was UAE and Bahrain and Israel, right? These are the same people that blew that off. Like, they did not understand the significance of that. And again, you said enough. We've talked about him many times with Anthony Blinken and the fairs that he's had over, several years. But these are the same people that blew that type of stuff off. It's just not a big deal. And here's the reality of it. I get it, from a libertarian point of view, you don't want to be, you try to stay out of it as much as you can, but you have to have some influence, especially if you're a world leader. You have to have some influence, because if you don't, somebody else is. And we've talked about the brick with China for a couple episodes, and that's what you're seeing. It's just continued expansion, continued influence, and you have to have some type of force projection. You have to have some type of foreign policy. Like Josh has said, I don't even know what the dude's doing. I haven't seen anything successful come out of anything. One thing I do believe is, especially with the death of the I think it was a U.S. contractor, right? And then they said some service members were injured. I would like to believe that if this was done under Trump's watch, Ghani would no longer be the 2IC anymore. That's what I would want to believe. Okay, because there does have to be some show of force. And when I heard Biden's thing, I heard his speech in response to this, and he starts his speech off with, let me be very clear, and I'm paraphrasing here, we are not looking to escalate any type of aggression or conflict with Iran. I mean, dude, that is not the way you start that out. The way you start that out is, you killed an American, service member or an American contractor, you kill an American citizen, I'm going to turn your place into a parking lot. That's how you do it. And then it's not just say it, you actually have to do it. And I'm tired of Biden playing like the tough guy. Make no mistake about it. Hear me, and I'm not kidding. Dude, what are you doing? Literally. And here's the other thing. The media sits on it, because I had to dig to find anything about the Syria issue. And like the second piece with the rocket stuff, like I hadn't even heard about that yet. I dug to find the contractors and the bomb drone or the contractor and the bomb drone and the service members, injured. And then you look to see the follow-up about, the U.S., response. We fired a couple rockets. No, dude, it's time to start leveling stuff. And I get it. You're not trying to start war, but you have to be deliberate about your actions. And right now, we are so reactive. And there's a fine line, okay? There's a fine line between being Bolton and a complete war hawk, and having, establishing yourself as a world power and influencing, right? There is a fine line there. But you can't just keep, sitting back and taking punches, because here's the reality of it is we're talking about tactical level stuff, but going back to brick, that's strategic, man. That is strategic, that we are talking about decades, decades. And it's good to know that to combat brick, that I think last year we estimated the value. We didn't estimate, we pulled it off, the internet, but it was estimated that the value of brick was to be at about $4 trillion. And it was good because the US response was $30 million. Like, dude, we're so far behind the power curve. And when you go back, and you know what, we need to do another episode shortly about Antony Blinken, specifically. And when you look at the failures of him, and it's this entire administration. I saw a tweet yesterday. They were talking about, hey, because Trump's doing a rally in Waco, or did a rally in Waco, and people are like, hey, look at the large cult. And my whole thing is like, hey, after the last 26 months of what I've witnessed with this administration, hey, man, I'm all for the cult. Maybe not him. We can get into, DeSantis, Trump, whatever. But my point being is, like, this last 26 months, not only domestically, but internationally has been a train wreck. And because our domestic situation is so dire and has been so piss poor, people aren't even focusing on the international stuff because they still can't afford $4 a gallon gas, or the $1.7 million house you got to buy in Santa Clara or wherever the heck that is. I mean, dude, it's just completely mind boggling to me.
Yeah, me too. It's what I'm tired of saying it. We should do an episode on Antony Blinken, but dude, we called that one. I mean, it's not because we're, Republican right wingers or anything like that. The guy's incompetent, and he's a State Department, he's a career diplomat, which I'd go so far as to say 9 out of 10 career diplomats are worthless. Just absolutely worthless. They do not live in the real world. They're just rose-colored glasses, whatever you want to call them. They're just out of touch, man. Completely out of touch, to the level of how it was in Vietnam, when back in the day, where they just see Josh knows, where they changed how they did everything. I think they are as blind or more than they were back then. Where Go ahead, Josh.
No, I do. I was gonna say, man. So we touched on a couple things there. One, absolutely. I don't think at this point that you can chalk it up to them being blind or stupid. At this point, I think it's chalked up to it's intentional. They're intentionally ignorant. They know what to do. They know what they know what the right answer is. They're just not gonna do it because that doesn't get the voters.
I guess. I mean, at the ground pounder level, your mid-level, mid to low level State Department diplomat is just stupid when it comes to the way the world works. They're willfully stupid. They've been brainwashed, like we said before. After seeing them at work, it's just, a success for them is status quo. Not moving forward is a success. We just want things status quo. We cannot upset the apple cart here. We cannot, we've got to be diplomatic. There was one guy who gave a speech. I listened to him give a speech to the host nation. They'd all gathered for our July 4th celebration. And, that was our big holiday. The Chinese do the Lunar New Year. Everybody does Christmas, but each nation has their own thing. And July 4th is the one where the U.S. Embassy, that we go all out. And this guy got up there, and he at the time he was the charge, so he was in charge. There was no ambassador at that point. And I was just like, man, what's he going to say? Because the thing that was going on at that time, and it was during the Trump administration, was the 2%. You folks got to get up your 2%. Otherwise, we're going to have to be mean. And he got up there in the speech on July 4th, and man, he laid down the law very diplomatically. And that was the one time I saw them kind of go against the grain, risk upsetting the apple cart, and just like, hey, man, I know you're all gathered here, but it's time to pony up your 2%. You need to get on the wagon with this and come on in for the big win. All off Full Metal Jacket. So, yeah, Josh, I hear what you're saying, but man, just seeing those people willfully ignorant is one way of looking at it, I suppose, but just completely brainwashed and no courage, uh, no personal courage at all. Not willing to put themselves out there. That's why I cannot stand career politicians. That's why I do like the fact that you can appoint someone to ambassadorship. I do like that because I did see an ambassador. She didn't give a flying F. She's like, nope, we're U.S. first. Get on the team, like the guy said in Full Metal Jacket, and come on in for the big win. We're in this together, but you're going to do it our way, because we're done just listening to you talk. So speaking of listening to people talk, I think Trump's done, dude. What did we say in the last episode? I don't know. I can't remember exactly what you guys said, but I said nothing's going to come of this.
Roger's so upset with you right now.
Well,
no. You know what? Here's
done,
the thing. Here's the thing with Trump, and here's what's gonna. Who knows how this stuff plays out here in the next year or so. And I think Josh tweeted something out earlier talking about Walker and Kerry Lake and a couple other folks. There are portions of the country where he's got a great amount of influence, but there are portions of the country that he doesn't, and he's got to recognize that. And he failed to. He failed to in Georgia, right? He failed to in Georgia. He failed to in Arizona. And what you have to look at is, well, I say in Waco where he had 10,000 people show up to his rally, I think that's pretty good influence. My point being, there are places where he motivates people to come out and vote against him. And I think his inability to see that, to recognize that, because I think we could arguably say it hurt him in Pennsylvania. We could say it hurt him in Georgia. We could say it hurt him in Arizona. And the problem is it's going to hurt him in enough states that you might not be able to win. Okay. Hey, if it hurts you in California, who cares? If it hurts you in New York, who cares? Okay. Hurts you in Arizona. Okay. Becomes a big deal. Hurts you in Pennsylvania, becomes a big deal. Hurts you in Wisconsin, hurts you in Michigan, and God heaven forbid, hurts you in Florida, because that's the other thing that people haven't talked about yet is, and Josh, you may have a greater feeling for this than what we do. Ron DeSantis is probably pretty freaking popular down there right now. Okay. And Florida, by all accounts, especially with this last midterm, is even CNN. Hey, this is a red state now. Like the Democrats were actually going to start pulling money out of it when it seems like there's been a 2-decade push where it's just almost purple. And then we're going to take it blue. And now it seems to be solidly red. And so now you have to look and say, wow, is, with Trump and DeSantis, which DeSantis we all think he's going to announce, and he probably will, what does that do to Florida? Okay, do you break up Florida? Does it break up Florida? Because the one thing about, I think, from what I get, is I believe DeSantis voters would vote for the Republican nominee because I think it's binary. Kurt Schlichter said it best yesterday. It's a binary decision, period. It's Biden, whoever he runs against. That's it. I'm not so sure Trump voters will do that. That bothers me because it goes back to, don't trust the system. Don't trust mailing. I get it. But at the end of the day, one of the two are going to win, and you got to come out and you got to support, who is closer to you ideologically and who's better for the country. And it ain't Biden. I'm telling you that right now. I just don't know. I'll throw it over to Josh. I don't know. And you have a much better feel for this, especially down in that area. But I do feel that the DeSantis supporter would support the GOP nominee. I think a large portion of the Trump supporters may sit it out, not even vote at all. And then when you look at how much he motivates the left to vote against him, and maybe even independents and some of those on the right to vote against him, and with the states that you're looking at that were red or maybe purple now go blue, I don't know he can win just based on the math, right? Just based on the math.
I agree. Anecdotal, but a number of friends and family in Florida, they are tired of Trump. They voted for Trump in 2016. They voted for Trump in 2020. They went to rallies. They carried his water and everything. but they're tired. They're tired of Trump. They're tired of hearing about the 2020 election. And like you said, DeSantis is extremely popular. He is very popular. He's probably the most popular governor Florida has ever had. There was a governor back when I was younger, growing up in Florida, a guy named Lawton Childs. And I mean, there's a high school in Tallahassee named after him. He was pretty popular, but nowhere near what DeSantis is. He didn't carry Dade County, right? I mean, that's the level of popularity you're talking
And
about
that's
with Ron
huge.
DeSantis.
I mean, that's
That's
monumental.
massive. Yeah, it's historical. Trump didn't carry Dade County, right, in the presidential election, and you're gonna have those folks, like you said, you're gonna have some Trump supporters. Are probably gonna stay home if DeSantis runs. They're gonna stay home. But I'm telling you right now, a lot of people will come out and vote for DeSantis, in a presidential election. Probably more so in Florida than they'll show up and vote for Trump. And it's like, and I've said it, dude, Trump is so polarizing. Like, he has to, whoever that 2024 candidate is, they have to be able to pull those independents. They have to. They cannot. They have to be able to pull the fence sitters. Trump will not pull the fence sitters. A bunch of fence sitters will stay home, are the same people that didn't vote for Trump in 2020 aren't going to vote for Trump in 2024. And I know there's some of our listeners that don't want to hear that. They still think that Trump can win it. They still think Trump is a guy. I'm telling you, you're wrong. You're 100% wrong. You've been wrong for a year now. He's not the guy. Trump is done. And you say Trump has influence? He pulled 10,000 people in Waco. Okay. Well, what's the population of Waco? 140,000 maybe? 120, 140,000? Not all of them were from Waco. I guarantee you that.
No, but I'll tell you this, it doesn't turn to votes, but I don't know of any other politician out there right now other than DeSantis in Florida that's pulling crowds as big as that. And I get it. It doesn't amount for shit, but it does when you have 10, 15, 20,000 people showing up. You can't just say he has no influence. You can't write it off either, because you can't win if you don't pull that voter base. It works both ways.
He had those big rallies in 2020. Now, notwithstanding shenanigans, with the voting, he had those big rallies. It didn't translate into people showing up.
No, you have to pull the independent votes, like you said, but you can't just write off the Trump voters either, because you won't win without those.
I'm not writing them off.
You can't write them off for the blanket on it, for the
primary, the general.
Primary, God bless. No, the general, right? But the primary is what's important, because I think that DeSantis can pull the Trump voters. I really do. I do think that someone will stay home. Hell, depending on how crazy Trump gets, to me, it's very off-putting right now. It's very off-putting. And if it continues down this road of him being off-putting and he still wins the primary and he's the candidate, man, I don't even know if I'll show up to vote for him. I may ride in like Josh, because I'm getting tired of his BS. I'm getting tired of it, man. It's like, okay, dude, last week we're dealing with, you're going to possibly get indicted. And what does he do? He goes and attacks DeSantis. And the only thing he does is call Alvin Bragg Fat Alvin, which is kind of funny. But it's like, dude, where are your priorities? It's like, you are scared to death of this man, and it's plain as day. I'm with Josh. I mean, he is not the candidate. He's not going to win. It's going to be a replay, and it doesn't matter who he runs against. It's not going to happen. And the listeners, I mean, again, Josh said something. Trump voters are tired. You said that, right, Josh?
Yeah. So yeah, they're tired, man.
I'm seeing that. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of folks. Rodney and I had a discussion about this the other day, and it's just like, I think he's, we were all buying Trump flags and buying the merch and all that stuff, and now it's just like, yeah, well, that was then. This is now, and I'm tired of your BS. It's he all of his worst qualities. Put it this way, the way I see it, all of his worst qualities are coming out, and it's just, I think he's done.
He doesn't have the influence anymore. Because if he didn't have the influence, and granted, Herschel Walker was not a great candidate, right? Herschel Walker that guy is dumber than a bag full of hammers. But he couldn't get Herschel Walker elected in Georgia. All right, he couldn't get a conservative elected in the South. Like, that's crazy. He doesn't have influence. He couldn't get Oz, again, another absolute shit candidate, He couldn't get odds elected in Pennsylvania. He won Pennsylvania in 2016. I think Joe Biden won it in 2020. He doesn't have that. He couldn't get Kerry Lake elected in Arizona. And now this is all notwithstanding shenanigans with the votes, right? All right. He couldn't get Masters elected in Arizona. He couldn't get Laxalt elected. Where was that? That was Nevada, right, Roger?
Yeah, is it Nevada or New Mexico? One of the two.
Yeah, one of the two. Like he couldn't get him in Nevada. Okay, and these are states he did very, very well in 2016. These are states he carried in 2016. So to say he has influence, okay, he can draw big crowds. Everybody likes to go to a party, but nobody wants to stay and clean up. And Trump can throw a party. Okay. Well, shit, man. All of his parties now, they're turning out like Coachella. It's the people who are showing up are only the absolute 100%. Like, I'm not going to say cult, but they're just the 100% believers. That's it. Everybody else who was like, man, that's just really too far for me to drive. Nah, I don't feel like doing it. Nope. He's not getting those people anymore. He's not getting, and pretty soon, all of his rallies are going to look like, what was that name of that party that had never happened down in the Bahamas? Those dudes went to jail over because they conned everybody. Like, that's what his rallies, it's going to go from.
Fire Island.
Yeah. Hey, man.
I can remember Fire Island. I can remember Fire Island, but not the word primary.
Primary.
What the hell is wrong with me?
Yeah. Well, that's the direction his rallies are going. Trump is done. People need to get off the Trump train. And, when Ron DeSantis declares, people need to get behind Ron DeSantis because he's actually electable.
Well, the thing is, I don't think you can make a broad statement and say that he has no influence because it depends on where you're talking about. And I'm gonna agree with you and then disagree, Rush. So here's like his top states: Alabama, 62%. This is 2023 numbers. His approval rating: Alabama, 62%; Wyoming, 62%; West Virginia, 61%. I won't give the numbers. I'll just keep going. Couple: Louisiana, Idaho, Kentucky, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Mississippi, South Carolina. But to the point I was originally making, you know where he doesn't have that favorability at, or at least above 50? Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Kansas. That's the problem, right? He's got a lot of influence in the states that are already deep red anyway. The problem is, going back to what you said about the independent voters or maybe leaning slightly to the right to the conservatives, you can have 99%, approval rating in Alabama. It don't matter because they're going to vote red anyway. Can you pull Pennsylvania? Can you pull Arizona? Can you pull Michigan? And I think that's where he falls short. And the problem is, sometimes you live in an echo chamber. It's like, yeah, I can pull 20, 30, 40,000 people in Texas or whatever that's going to vote red anyway. But can you do that in those swing states or states that didn't used to be swing states, right? That were generally red, but now all of a sudden have become a swing state, has become a purple state. And that's my issue, to say that he has no influence in this, now that's just wrong. It just depends on where you're talking about. And right now, with the way things stand in the states that matter, he doesn't have the influence that just mathematically are going to give you the numbers. Because I tell you what, man, you lose Arizona, you lose Pennsylvania, you lose Ohio, you lose, a couple of these other states that aren't, above that 50%, you're done, right? You're done. And here's another state that's not on that list. Florida. Okay. And that kind of goes case in point. You don't win Florida, you're not winning. Okay. That's just the bottom line, especially with the Republicans. There aren't enough electoral votes out there with that. So again, I guess we'll see how everything plays out, but I agree with you. He's polarizing, man. He brings people out, but you can't write off the voters and you have to say, well, okay, you have to have that candidate. And it goes back to my initial question to Josh. And I guess we'll see how all this plays out. Can DeSantis pull enough of those diehard Trump voters? I don't even know what the numbers are. I don't know if the numbers are great enough that it makes a difference. Maybe it doesn't. For me, I'd vote, hey, man, if DeSantis is the Republican nominee, I'm voting for him, right? I love Trump. I love his policies, this and that, but if DeSantis is the nominee, that's who I'm supporting. I don't know the numbers on the Trump side that say that they wouldn't support a DeSantis bid. If it's DeSantis, still got a ways to go.
I'd have to see. So the states you rattled off: Alabama, Wyoming and stuff. I'd have to go back and see how those Trump backed candidates in those states did, right? To say whether he, to counter your point, whether he has influence there or not. I know the whole,
They did
I know,
well, but not because of Trump. They did well because a lot of those people were already sewed into. They were the incumbent, had already pulled 60% approval rate, right?
exactly. And that was the exact case in Alabama with Katie Britt. After Mo Brooks, because Trump initially endorsed him, and then he pulled his endorsement after when Brooks just kind of like, his campaign kind of bogged down. And then Katie Britt, who was already ahead of Mo Brooks, and was, they were like, okay, she's probably going to win. He comes in and it's like, okay, well, I endorse Katie Britt. It's like, well, you endorsed a horse that's a lap ahead. Great. Good job. It's really hard to say whether he had influence in that or not when that was already, that's the person that was already winning. I'd have to go back and look at the other states to see, whether his influence actually helps or whether his endorsement actually hurt.
Well, in those states it helped. They came, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but like when he touts the midterm victories or whatever, it was all based in those states that were gonna, it's like C3 endorsing those folks. Hey, look at us, man. Our folks in Alabama won. Our folks in Louisiana, yeah, they were going to win anyway, regardless. And that's how he skews it. What's interesting is even through, some of the recent polls, the bottom line is I'm curious to see, and again, I get it with the polls, but I'm curious to see once DeSantis actually formally runs to see where those numbers lie. Because right now it's easy to poop on DeSantis because he hasn't declared. Nobody's okay. Well, right now it's only Trump and Nikki Haley and maybe Pence, which he has no shot at winning. So I'll be curious, Luke, to see how it goes when DeSantis actually says he's going to run, because I think those numbers change a lot, probably in his favor would be my guess.
I'm going to be bold. I'm going to be bold and say all of this is academic. In my opinion, all of this is academic. It's going to be DeSantis by a landslide. And the only thing that in the primary, it's going to be him by a landslide. It's not even going to be close. And Trump is going to do one of two things. He's either going to go away semi-quietly. What are the odds of that? I don't know. Or he's going to pull some BS and try to go third candidate. And that's going to be the whole, third party. And that's going to be that's going to be the new hotness. Then we'll see if it really makes a difference. I really don't think it will, though. I don't think it'll be possible for him to even do that. He's going to try, and that will keep some Trump voters away, because there's all these rules. You can't just, there's certain thresholds that have to be met. There's certain deadlines that you have to, file before this particular date. And I think that this is what's going to happen, folks. I'm calling it now. There will be talk about that when he starts getting trounced in Iowa, starting in Iowa. DeSantis is just going to blow him out of the water, and everyone else, by the way. Trump won't even garner as many as Pence. I'm telling you, it's not going to happen. He's going to start making noise. I'm telling you, he's going to start making noise. Well, you're probably right, Roger. He probably get more than Pence, but it's not going to be close when it comes to DeSantis. He's going to start at that point making noise about, oh, this is rigged. He's whatever the excuse is. I'm going to run as third party or write in or whatever. Then we'll see when the general comes how much difference that makes. But he is going to continue to dig his grave and put his foot in his mouth and act unbecoming to where he won't even, I'm calling it now, if he does that, some nonsense, he won't make as near as big a dent as Ross Perot did. That's how done I think Trump is. It's not. I think it's all academic. It's going to be DeSantis. I don't think Trump. I think by that time, he's just gonna. It's not going to get any better for him. He's done, dude.
So I think he's a bigger speed bump than what you guys are thinking he's going to be.
He's got a long way to go,
and so Roger's not in the engine anymore on the Trump train. But he's not in the caboose either. That's what I'm getting. You hear Roger? You hear his voice? He's like, he sees it. He knows it's coming, right?
No, because I think it goes back to those states we talked about. But the problem is, I don't think you can just totally discount them. And what's interesting is, as we're looking at polls, again, polls are like, buttholes. But with DeSantis having not declared right now, and this is national, and we all know it comes out local, but there's about a 15-point difference in favorability, which I think once you announce you're running, probably serves to his benefit, because more people are on, you back somebody who's running versus not. Real quick, I want to change the topic real quick. And we do need to, we need to make our predictions is what we got to do. We got to get that out there. But I want to throw this over to Josh, because this is something that's in his, in his basket. I forget who's doing it in the House, but they're getting ready to propose term limits And part of the deal is that McCarthy is going to bring this to the floor. Now, we know it's not going to pass, right? I mean, it'll never make it out of the Senate, and Biden will never sign it, whatever. Point being, what he has proposed, and I kind of want to get your, we know where we stand on term limits. I want to get your thoughts on the actual limits themselves and what you think they should be or whether you agree with it. He's proposing 6 years for Congress, House of Representatives, so 3 terms, and 12 years for senators, 2 terms. Is that too short? Is that spot on?
I don't know. I mean, I think that's that's in the ballpark of what we've talked about before. And one of the things that, I won't speak for you two, but that's more in the ballpark for one of the things that I presented before is, for senators, you get your first term, you figure out what's, where the gym is and, where the chow hall is and, how to push your little vote button and stuff like that. And then your second term, that is for you to push whatever state you're there representing. That's for you to get your pet project done, for your state and through, and then you're done. And then somebody new. Like, so I mean, that's in a ballpark of of what I said before. So I'm good with it. But
Good
you're
with it.
right. It's not going to pass. All this is, I mean, these are all Pyrrhic victories anyway. There was just a vote. I mean, we couldn't even get 60 GOP Senate House of Representatives to who was it? I forget what they were voting on. But dude, there was 60 folks from the GOP. They voted nay on it. And you're just like, really? They couldn't even they couldn't even stick with the party on that one. But I can't remember what it was. I'll remember it here in a second.
Yeah, man, guarantee Crenshaw was one of those that voted nay. Guarantee it. That guy's in it to win it, per se. He's in it for the long haul. He's gonna get rich. He's already gotten rich. Whatever. I'm all for term limits, Roger. I know you're not, but I would even be okay if it was twice that, honestly. Fine. I'm gonna make it 12 years. All right, 12 years. But yeah, I'm for it. Otherwise you get Mitch McConnell who falls down some stairs, is in physical therapy rehabilitation for how long? 2-3 weeks? It was a while. I mean, good grief. I mean, come on. It's I don't know. These
Hey, where's
geriatrics got
Fetterman
to
at
go.
lately?
Good Lord. You know what's funny is I think I can't remember who posted it on Twitter, but they're like, "Oh, it was Cat Turd." he's trolling people by furthering the conspiracy theory of body doubles, because he, according to him,
Oh
it's like
yeah.
anytime you bring up body doubles, the left just goes they lose their ever loving minds. But you look at those side by side pictures of Fetterman. It's like, this is Fetterman a year ago. This is him now, and it's like, okay, the two don't look alike. I'll give him that. But you ever been around somebody who's had a stroke? Boy, that changes someone's appearance. It changes a lot about a human being. Uh, so yeah, but yeah, Joe Biden, some of them, but that guy's aging quickly, man, and he's the president. So you go back to Lincoln and George Bush, Barack Obama. They look completely different after their presidencies, and they were relatively young men. You can speed the aging process to a septuagenarian. It's going to go downhill fast.
Well, that's why
So
you got to be like Biden and spend 40% of your time on vacation.
yeah, and that's
Keep you young.
it's also a couple other predictions. We should do a show on our predictions. Next episode or something, cover some of these topics, and like even go down to if it's DeSantis, who will be some of his cabinet picks. But is the big one is Joe Biden actually going to run? It looks like he is. But go with the prediction on that, and go with the prediction on who would be DeSantis's running mate. That is an interesting little
Tim
kettle of
Scott,
fish.
man.
Tim Scott, that might be a good one.
That'd be my man.
But yeah, so that's what I got. You want me to get some shout outs here real quick and kick it to Josh? So I the usual suspects. Diego actually sent me a message about our last episode, which is kind of surprising to me. We got some good feedback on that last episode. We kind of thought it would bore people to death, but apparently some people really liked it. Appreciate that feedback you gave us, Diego. And same with Dylan. Appreciate you listening to the podcast. Dylan's one of those ones that said, if y'all did 3 episodes a week, I'd stop listening. I like the one a week format. And Jed, hadn't get Jed a shout out in a while, and everybody who joined the Slack channel. I appreciate y'all doing that. Hopefully we can use that for our little presidential debate, threads and stuff like that. So anyway, that's all I got for this week, Josh.
Yeah, real quick before I close it out here, don't forget, get on the Slack channel. A lot of good traction on there. We have a number of followers who, they're not on the normal social media platforms, but they've jumped on the Slack channel. So hit us up. We'll get an invite out to you, and so you can jump in there. As far as shout out, same thing. The absolutely the usual suspects. But a few extra this week. Hey, John up in DC, appreciate you listening. Rodney out in Alaska, and we got a couple of more folks that listen that have specifically asked me not to shout them out, because they are in they either live or work in what we would consider occupied territory. And we definitely don't want to do anything to to put them in jeopardy. But for those who those silent ones out there that are listening, we definitely appreciate it, and we appreciate you even more for for listening, especially when you're surrounded by folks who probably would not appreciate our views and stuff we talk about here on the Cup. So with that, everybody have a great week. Take care of each other and keep those Canteen cups tightly secured and full of some whiskey.